Welcome to the fifth Biodiful Roundtable discussion series, where we talk about diverse things related to biodiversity and business. My name is Milla Unkila, and I come from the Biodiful Research Project. And with me, we have Sami Lundgren from UPM. You can explain the word in English whenever you feel like it. And then we have Nathalie Clément from our host, Ernst & Young. Thank you for having us again here.
You're
That's
very
great.
much welcome.
Then we have Senja Forsman-Katainen from, I got their name right, two parts of the name.
Last name.
From Lassila, Tikanoja. That's another two names, but I did it, so welcome from there. And then Satu Teerikangas, whom I know best, as she's also from our Biodiful Research Project. To get the discussion going, today we're talking about biodiversity reporting. And as you are all here, you all have something to do with biodiversity reporting. So why don't you tell us, the audience, and me, what is your current role and how do you deal with how does it relate to biodiversity reporting? I think we'll have our only male guest here to start the round.
On this day of the ladies, so
yes, we are equal opportunity.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So my name is Sami Lundgren. I'm the head of responsibility at UPM. UPM is a kind of Finnish forest product company, quite big one, long history, 150 years. And of course, the linkage to biodiversity starts from the beginning because we are using wood from forests. And my background, I'm a biologist, so happy to be here.
Welcome. Nathalie?
Thank you. Yes. So my name is Nathalie Clément and I'm heading the corporate sustainability practice here in Helsinki, Finland, or climate change and sustainability services, as it's called. And yes, well, we are dealing a lot with both reporting and also biodiversity nowadays, a very growing topic, of course, because of the tsunami of regulation. It's CSRD one day, taxonomy the next, etc. But this topic is also very close to my heart, so it's really great to be here to discuss this today.
Welcome. And Senja?
My name is Senja Forsman-Katainen. I'm a head of sustainability in Lassila, Tikanoja, which is kind of a service provider locating in Helsinki here in Finland, but we have also operations in Sweden too. And how the biodiversity is linked to our business? Well, actually, we are providing waste management services, which is quite linked to biodiversity topics. We also do restoration of land, which is more or less biodiversity topic too. And then we kind of help our cities and communities in green building issues. And one topic of that is also biodiversity. And my responsibility as a head of sustainability is, of course, the reporting of all such issues in internally, but also externally. And how biodiversity is linked to my life in general, I think it's linked to every single or everyone's life in Finland. We are very nature-oriented kind of a nature.
And Satu.
And my name is Satu Teerikangas. I work as Professor of Management and Organization at the University of Turku School of Economics, working with Milla on the Biodiversity Respectful Leadership Project as the co-director of the project. And in terms of research, the reason I'm here is that I've been particularly with our team, we've been working on the connection between business and biodiversity. And then some of our colleagues, particularly in Jyväskylä, have focused on reporting, so I'm representing them today. And then on my own side, on the level of the whole consortium, interdisciplinarily, we're trying to make sense of what on earth is this beast that we call biodiversity respectful leadership. So that's kind of the two hats, business and leadership, and a bit of reporting that I'm here with today. But really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah. We have this very cozy setting here. I have to tell you, my dear audience, if you haven't watched previous roundtables, we had roundtable also in the previous discussions, but it was in a different room, and now we have this nice cozy setting. And I hear from the marketing people that this is actually the first webcast that is sent from this studio. So you are making history listening to this, and we are also. Exactly. But let's go back to business. I think that most companies know something about sustainability reporting, but is biodiversity reporting a thing in itself, or is it just something that's one part of general sustainability reporting? Is biodiversity reporting a thing anywhere? Is it, for example, in Sami or Senja in your companies, a thing? If you want to take the first one.
Ladies first.
This is a tricky question in a way. You could kind of argue that it should be a separate thing or a topic itself, because there is a challenges and opportunities related to biodiversity. But on the other hand, I see it like any of the sustainability topics that they are kind of linked together. So biodiversity, climate change and mitigation, circular economy and human rights, they are in a way linked together. And therefore, I see that you should look at as a whole too. There, for example, our reporting, there is a section about biodiversity. And there's a reason for that one. We want to kind of educate our own employees, but also say or tell our stakeholders that we understand the topic itself, we want to do actions in it, and we are learning about it. But on the other hand, it's also a part of other topics, what we have in sustainability.
Well, I fully agree. If we think about UPM, so we actually had our last sustainability report in 2006. And since that we have been integrating, so it was published last Friday, the 17th, integrated annual report.
Yeah.
And we don't have 200 pages of sustainability, but all the topics that we see material are there alongside of the financial statements and all those topics. And then having biodiversity in there, it's integrated. There's something about it there, but it's not a separate report. I think it is as it shall be, among other material topics.
Yeah.
You have, Nathalie, probably you're working with your client companies. How typical it is to have a separate part of biodiversity reporting in sustainability reporting?
Well, if it's there, it's as Sami said, it's getting more and more integrated with everything else because of the reporting requirements. So actually not that many companies are reporting on biodiversity as it is. And if there is something, it's, well, not so much, but now because of the increasing regulation, especially those companies that have defined it as material for their company, they of course need to disclose it on a much more detailed level. So that it's really seen then as a natural process together with climate change and other topics, how to drive business forward so that it's part of the plan going forward. How are we taking nature into account when doing business?
And if I may continue from that in terms of what our colleagues, particularly at the University of Jyväskylä, Marilena Mäkelä, whom I'm kind of replacing today, what she and her team have been doing over the last years in Biodiful, they've been looking at the biodiversity reporting of the forest sector, so your company and others, as well as the food sector. And what they have found then looking at the annual report or CSR reports is that in a sense they've been trying to track where is biodiversity named or kind of related terms. And they found, for example, that the forestry sector has been reporting on biodiversity related issues over the last decade. So it's kind of mature versus in the food sector, it's more recent and it's kind of overall quite varied in terms of kind of what is reported, kind of what items, and it might vary between companies across the years, but it's just we can't say that there's an all-encompassing biodiversity reporting approach that is being used by companies. So it varies from sector to sector, company by company, year by year. But the good thing is that in a sense there's an increasing interest, increasing appetite across sectors, so that's good news.
Well, of course, the example from our side, so we created in Finland our biodiversity program in 1998, and that was linked to the forestry. That's natural for us. But then, of course, we reported biodiversity as part of forestry. And now we have kind of been seeing that the importance or interest towards biodiversity has been increasing. So we did 2 years ago that we separated, first of all, reporting point of view, kind of responsibility focus area, that biodiversity is an entity of its own. And it's not only about the forestry. And we did the change a few years ago. Now it's an own section, its own indicators. But it has been a kind of natural development, in my opinion.
I think that what you said that you not only have sustainability, but you also have financial issues. So it's a genuinely integrated report. That's on the one hand, that's the way we should be going, that we should view firms as, an entity where everything connects to everything. But on the other hand, how big do you see the risk that for companies who are maybe not as mature in biodiversity related issues, that when there is no specific biodiversity reporting section, it's a thing that ends up in the report like, oh, I've heard something about biodiversity. Let's have one sentence somewhere, because I remember from Marilena's research that seems to be the approach for some companies where it is. So not having a specific section on it may make it possible to just have it as an like add-on somewhere, hide it that, yeah, we've heard about this concept. Do you see that as a risk? Should companies start with making a specific biodiversity section before being able to integrate it to it? So what's your viewpoint?
I would actually say the key point is that companies would think about their connection to biodiversity, and then whether and how they report it to me is secondary. And the key thing actually for all company managers or CSR directors and top managers and kind of board members is to think about what is my company's kind of connection to biodiversity. So how are we impacting and damaging biodiversity? And also what is our position in the value chain, and the connection to biodiversity is particularly crucial, for example, for forest companies or food sector. So those industries or those companies that are closest to land. But in a sense, we use reporting as reporting is a strategic tool to support managing the organization and kind of developing the organization and communicating externally. But reporting as such actually doesn't matter. It's a tool for strategic purposes. And that's why I wouldn't actually, for me, I might be wrong, but I'm not a reporting expert, so I'm allowed to say things from a generalist perspective here. So excuse me if I'm saying some silly things here. But that's why I'm thinking that it's more, I wouldn't say it matters whether it's reported by it's kind of in a separate section as part of the broader reporting. The key thing is that companies start thinking about it. And if reporting helps in this process of thinking about it, then in a sense, that's the key thing.
Yep. No, just thinking about how this whole history has evolved from first the reporting on climate, maybe even more, and then also biodiversity, etc. Many companies start small. Yeah. They realize that they want to say something, but it's not very structured yet, but at least they will try. They want to say that, hey, we understand and we're thinking about this. It's absolutely not perfect, but it's to show interest and then go further. And then, of course, if you end up as now seeing that it is material in the business, then, of course, there are rules for that, especially in Europe. But it's a process, and it doesn't come 1 year.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an evolution.
Yes, an evolution. Thank you for finding the word.
And for example, what Sami just described, that you first had a forest section there and you were talking about the forest itself, and now you have the biodiversity section there. It's kind of also that companies are learning about it and really understanding that what is the concept of or topic of biodiversity, and suddenly you probably realize that there are many aspects under this umbrella. And you have done already some of the actions. And therefore, I don't see that it's necessary to have a separate topic of biodiversity. I think the starting point is that actually you start to talk about the biodiversity.
Yeah. I fully agree. You need to start it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
The thing. And of course, I'm a kind of reporting nerd from my whole life. So the fact is that you get what you measure.
Exactly.
And if you think about biodiversity, so we went actually to COP14 to Cairo. And we were there boldly and we stated that, yes, we want to have a net positive impact. Because we wanted to have something that we can measure. And we knew that that won't be perfect. And we can't follow all the 20,000 species in Finnish forests. That's fact of life. Even we have mapped our forests. But we created a kind of index that we know that this is impacting positively if we get more decaying wood, if we get more kind of tree species. Created an index and started to measure that. It's not a perfect, but it start.
Yeah. You have this index, but as I think that very often we hear that companies are a bit further along when it comes to combating climate change, because there's this nice one number, like carbon dioxide equivalent ton. There's this one number, and if they just follow their emissions, then that's like their driver for the problem. So it's kind of, in a way, it's even though it's a complex problem, it is sort of simpler problem. But for example, you come from very different fields, from different industry, and your impact on biodiversity emerges from very different roots. So what types of elements do you, for example, at Lassila, Tikanoja, report when it comes to biodiversity?
Yeah, we are not as far as you are when it comes to the biodiversity, but now we have kind of identified the issues where we can make an impact. And it's through our services, what we provide to our customers. And there we have identified some of the measures or indicators, let's say the hectares of restored land, for example, or we talk about the waters itself. We think that that's part of the biodiversity. So we didn't, for example, a few years ago, we didn't report our waters at all. Now we took that because we kind of acknowledge that there is a space what comes when we talk about the biodiversity meadow projects, what we do in cities and facilities and such. So we have tried to identify indicators which are kind of which we know, which we can talk about, which are concrete to our employees. But for sure, those are different than the indicators, for example, forest industry or the retailers and such. But this is kind of the starting point, since we don't have the CO2.
And there are people who are saying that CO2 is easy, and it's not.
It's not, but it's one number, so it's simpler.
It's one number, but at the same time, yes, we have an index for our forests, but of course, biodiversity is not only about forestry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we have our hydropower, and we have separate things in there. We know that if we are kind of removing obstacles from streams, we are kind of influencing the living conditions of the bottom-dwelling animals and so on. Or if we go for the history, we started the kind of measurement of the pollution from the mills for example, in Kymi 1968. And we do have an oligoceta index in there. It's easy to measure because there's a pipeline.
Yeah.
But it depends. And yes, I would love to get this one figure from somebody. Still haven't seen it, but waiting for that.
Yeah.
Actually, the example that you were providing, that I think quite nice, that you have started to think about a target, and you realize it's not perfect, but it actually gets you going. This is what we saw when we did interviews with the Finnish food sector a year ago, looking at this as how our Finnish companies addressing biodiversity. We kind of mapped them into different maturity categories. So the front runners were companies that were actually exploring, trying, and they said they didn't know, but at least they sought and tried and were active. Versus then we had, in a sense, followers and laggards who were kind of more passive. And I think the key element that we would recommend as researchers to companies is to start doing things, even though you don't have the perfect knowledge. Start trialing, start innovating before the legislation is arriving, so that you're kind of ready and also in advance of your competitors. So that's why I really enjoyed the way you shared what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we are going forward. We were discussing that you should integrate it to finance. Well, of course, we have been piloting that as well. So when we created this index 4 years ago, we took a 750 million euro revolving credit facility. Believe me, it took a while to convince the banks that it can be an indicator in margins, but it's there. And nowadays I see those same banks, and they have their own department of biologists.
Yeah.
And we were even bolder. We went and added that to the kind of bonus indicator for our top management. So their bonuses nowadays.
Yeah.
Biodiversity is out of the game.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
of
but
course,
Nathalie,
yeah.
you're seeing a lot of. You have a different visibility. You have visibility for several companies. So what do you think that are the main attitudes towards biodiversity or reporting? Is it like waiting and seeing, or are there companies like Satu was saying that are mature and trying to do something?
Well, I was going to say that it's also a little bit sector specific. You can see that certain sectors are ahead. Like, for instance, the finance sector are quite far already, and also now in comparing. So of course it makes sense then to compare those to get a little bit better understanding at least that where companies maybe are going, and then we have the food sectors and like forests and so there's one thing to compare the sectors instead of trying to compare everything, because that's not very. And then of course we have companies that have realized that it's part of the business story and that it's part of the actually going forward, because we all know that there is no economy without nature. We all know this. So it's just walking the talk and doing in different ways depending on what kind of company you are, how dependent you are, how much impact you have. So it's very interesting to see these differences in different companies then.
It's actually interesting building on that. In February, the Ministry of the Environment in Finland organized a morning webinar, a 3-hour webinar, where different sectors, Finnish sectors, were presenting their the biodiversity roadmap of their sector. So we had everything from construction to high technology all the way to hotels and restaurants. It was interesting to see. I was really surprised, and our researchers, we were really surprised that a lot of the sectors had already done their biodiversity roadmap in the last year or two. Some were then clearly in the process now that they were being asked by the ministry, and I think there was only one, not to be named, that was about to do it this spring. And it was actually, as researchers, we were positively surprised that at least also at the sector level that it was taking place. And if I recall right, it was the construction sector that has had the best kind of in terms of their indicators for the roadmap. So what were the targets and what are the indicators? And likewise, they went all the way to rewarding and bonus systems, and they were trying to look at this. How can they compare decision-making styles? So what decisions are biodiversity positive versus negative? So there were differences between also the maturity levels between the different sectors' biodiversity roadmaps. So then depending on which sector you're working in as a company, that also depends kind of what's the maturity of the sector.
If you actually have it in the reward system, then you are already quite far, because I think there are typical rewards, and biodiversity is maybe not one of them yet in quite a lot of companies. So
yeah, and I think that I happened to listen to a very funny presentation about the quick guide to greenwashing. Satu was in the same section, and it was a kind of an example of maybe not to do, what to do in companies. And one point was that allocate all sustainability related things to sustainability head or sustainability unit, and also the reporting, and make sure to detach them from the real business as far as you can. So it is sometimes heard, and I know some research that's been done that actually also happens, that sustainability is an individual area where the marketing and communications dudes or dudettes go and do the writing up nicely things. But how far do you think that how common is that type of approach? Because getting it into rewards, that really shows that that's not the case clearly. But how often does that still happen? How big a risk is it that reporting is kind of something that's just, you comms girls, you just take care of it?
Yeah, it exists still. Yeah. And you can also see that there are sustainability professionals who feel quite alone still to this day with the work, and they have a lot of it. So there is this old model. Yeah. But I have to say that in recent years there has been a huge change towards actually then the being it on in the management team, being it on the CFO table or whatnot, but in a clearly different role now, and that's great. So I have to say that in a very short time it has grown significantly. Also to understand, and in a way, I mean, one can say about regulation many things, but at least this CSRD, for instance, has brought about this, that you actually have to engage the whole company. And if not before, then at least now it should be clear for everyone that this is not the role of sustainability team in some corner somewhere to do this, but it's rather the whole company, including the different business areas and all that are going to take, into consideration. Okay, so the material things that we are looking at, what are they? So that really has changed.
Yeah. How about in your company? Because you're also in a field where you have a direct impact on nature. So I'm sure that you also have had some sort of learning curve at Lassila and Tikanoja in terms of this. So
you mean the reporting itself?
Yeah.
I was about to say that thanks to CSRD, for example, things are getting much more easier, because maybe it was the case earlier that there was a separate sustainability team who was doing the reporting and collecting the data and trying to figure out that what is valid or where's the impact and where's not. But nowadays I would say that at least in our company we don't have a board to do that one, because this is everybody's responsibility. You have to take the actions and responsibility of your own operations what comes to the sustainability issues also. For us, it's much easier to do it what comes to the climate and circular economy or the human resources, and now the biodiversity is coming to that pool more and more. And we are learning how to do that one, but still I think that, like you said, thanks to regulation, this is probably changing a lot.
In some cases, yeah, it's true. And adding also that there is an understanding and a realization that it's actually about finance also. So I mean, we see new sort of roles in sustainability, like sustainability controller or ESG controller. This kind of that wasn't there some years ago. So also the link with finance, the link with business is growing.
Yeah. But how much is it actually changing what companies do? Because you can measure stuff and you can regulate and you can sort of report stuff, but that's not yet in the business, because sometimes we as researchers, we've encountered situations where companies say that yes, this is a very good thing, very important thing, but unless you come up with a solution where we don't need to change our business model, we'll just keep communicating it. That's it. So, for example, how much does because you follow, for example, your impact, your biodiversity impact. So how much does it loop back to the activities that you are doing? What kind of process is that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'm still considering your earlier question because I'm kind of reporting to the head of communication. So in our case, it's a head of stakeholder relations. And of course, I've been in UPM more than 30 years, so I know everybody and so on. But one key thing for us is that as a sustainability professional, that I can speak about AOX and CO2 and COD and BOD and so on. And who understands me?
Nobody.
And if I go to speak about oligobeta index, so what the heck?
Yeah.
So actually, there is no right or wrong place to be. And one key learning for me is that I have kind of learned to communicate to some extent. So there are positives in that as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And it's kind of that no one can do this alone.
Yep, exactly.
You need a group of different kind of people. You need the group from the business. You need the group people from the sustainability. Nowadays, more and more, you need people from finance. It's kind of the mix of expertise when you talk about these kind of topics and reporting.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to my previous question, is that because when you are the one who has the data about the indexes, you said, okay, now what we are doing is doing this. Can we do something else?
Yep,
so are there that kind of discussions, and what results are there?
And actually, I don't have the data.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's gathering the data, but the data comes from the businesses.
Yeah.
And if we speak about our index, so yes, UPM owns 552,000 hectares of forest in Finland. That's quite a lot. So we have an IT system for that. So data comes from there. It's not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure, we have the people who are kind of coordinating and getting it. And then if we think about UPM, yes, we are a big animal. I have 20 people doing group things. I have 200 people in all the businesses, all the sites and so on. I have the field ecologists in Finland, in Uruguay, in USA. So of course they are doing the things. But then the important thing, in my opinion, is that you need to find a context. How does the biodiversity impact to your business? And now if we take the Finland, for example, climate change, that is going to change our forests. And we know it. We have 90% of trees in UPM forests are pine and spruce. What would be natural? You have more tree species, have more broadleaves. Having more broadleaves makes it more resilient for climate change. And we just happen to know that those broadleaves actually are the species which are impacting positively to biodiversity. So yes, we have a target to double the amount of broadleaves.
Yeah.
And that's a tangible example. It's a business example, but it influences biodiversity.
Yeah.
And that's what we have tried to do.
Yeah. So in your case, it seems that it actually does flow back to what what the
Absolutely.
company is actually doing. How about in your case? What?
Like I said, we see the biodiversity as an opportunity for us, because we have services that we can provide to our customers. So it comes with money when we sell the kind of a nature-related projects. Of course, that's kind of business case for us too. And now we try to figure out that what kind of opportunities there could be for us. But it's interesting because I was just thinking about this forest itself, and in your case you have to really think far ahead, many years, like tens of years ahead,
Even more.
Exactly. So to do such decision probably requires very good understanding about the situation and the urgency of that one.
And of course, that's the reason why we are cooperating, for example, with the universities, with the research institutes and so on. So I'm a good friend of Luke and Syke and Finnish Meteorological Institute and German IFEO and so on. Because we don't have all the knowledge, but we need to find the science.
Yeah.
And then we can do those decisions that are kind of impacting positively.
Satu, how ready are companies to actually react on the data that comes from there? If they get the data, how do they impact biodiversity? What do you say? What's the readiness level of actually sort of making those changes?
I think we're not yet there. So give it a few years and we will be there. But I think the question is that I think the good thing is that whereas perhaps since 2015 companies started to awaken to climate change, over the last 2 years, at least here in Finland, we've clearly seen kind of a rapid awakening and kind of recognition of the need to address the biodiversity crisis. And this is particularly the case with the larger companies that are already doing sustainability and responsibility reporting, and then also for companies who are whose customers are major multinationals, be they in Finland or abroad, who need to report toward those customers. So it says there is an awakening, there's an increasing interest, kind of a super kind of rapid uptake. So I would say let's be patient and let's give time to companies and these sustainability managers or whoever on the side with these organizations. You're lucky to have all this kind of these people. I recall talking to one sustainability manager a year ago, and this person was saying that he is an HR, legal, and sustainability manager alone in the company, clearly smaller than UPN. But then again, then you realize that when with such a remit, this person said that there's very little chance that actually he has time to even look at biodiversity. And then obviously the company, though related to biodiversity, will not have much taking place. So in a sense, it depends on the size of the sustainability team as well.
Sure.
But I would actually say that I'm on the positive because at least there's interest. And when there's interest, things will happen. But I think the dangerous thing is as if companies keep waiting for the perfect solution. So that's why I think your example of, in a sense, keeping going, innovating, exploring, moving forward, working with research institutes around the world is a best class example because that's how you're learning as you go, and you're building a world class as you go. But perhaps as a final note that in our interviews on biodiversity strategies, as well as in the last years on companies adopting circular economy strategies, in both cases we noticed that these kind of front-runner companies are ones where the company board and top managers or CEOs are actually driving this change. So they're not waiting for their sustainability unit or manager to lead the change, but actually it comes from the core of the core of the management or even the owners, the board members. So I think, and that's what we're seeing in recent years. In the last year in Finland, for example, there's been education targeted or training targeted at board members, at CEOs. And this is fantastic because in a sense, if you think about the business risk that biodiversity is posing, if I would be a CEO or board member, I would be very awake. So exciting to see what's going to happen over the next years.
And of course, it's kind of interesting in that sense that we don't have a perfect system at this moment. There are kind of organizations like Science-Based Targets for Nature. We are one of the companies who are testing it. There are new frameworks like DNFD, Task for Nature Health and Financial Disclosure. We just piloted that. It's visible in our annual report. It's nothing drastic in that sense. But taking step by step going forward.
How much are you... you were saying that Lassila and Tikanoja, you see it as an opportunity because you offer businesses.
For example.
You can sort of rewild stuff, for example. But I think that in your field, you are seeing it as a risk, but you have something to do.
It's both at the same time.
But you also have to react to it. So do you, Nathalie, see in your when you look at different companies, how many companies are awakening to the fact that it's not only maybe a risk, but it might provide new types of business opportunities?
Many. I mean, of course, on the climate side, it's clearer. So there we have the opportunity side. It's getting to biodiversity, maybe not as fast. And speaking about boards, I think it's a good thing to bring up that they have, of course, because of the new roles according to the legislation, so they are much more awake and understanding. And we have those who are really pushing the companies and saying, hey, you need to do, we want to see more of this. And then, of course, we have some who are not doing the same because they have a lot of energy putting just into understanding what is already happening because it's so much going on. Yeah, and then to the previous question, just on data, that it's great and to get the data on the biodiversity, it's not easy. We know we've had a discussion altogether on that because already in the data that now needs to be put in reporting, for instance, companies struggle a lot because the quality in some are good and some not, and you know that because it's going to be assured by an auditor that you need to get to a certain level. So there's a lot of work just also on the quality of the data, and there, of course, on biodiversity, it's even more. So I think those people who are working with it, it's going to take some time because.
But of course, it's really up to you as well.
Of course.
4 years ago, nobody was expecting that we kind of linked the biodiversity to loan. We just wanted to do it because we wanted to kind of raise the importance. And our auditor at that time, it wasn't EY. It will be in the future, yes. But they were surprised that we asked, can you assure that? We want to have a stamp on that. It has to be kind of official thing that we are following the kind of people who are loaning money to us. They need to trust us. Can you do it? Wow. Well, let's try. Let's do it. And it happened. But you just have to go there and test and pilot.
Absolutely, I agree.
We had in our couple of sessions ago, we had a participant from financial sector, and it was kind of revealing how big a leverage could the financial sector pose to transform the whole business, all across industries, if they only had the data and they only had the reports, because that would make it easier for them to orient those. But I'm kind of thinking that it's really interesting about the measurements. We are just we will very soon publish a blog post where we kind of highlight how different ways of measuring may provide different types of outcomes. A couple of months back, we got a research report from another research institute that was looking at the biodiversity impact of different types of proteins like cow or pork or chicken. And the results they got were exactly the opposite that our team exploring the very same things are just now about to publish. And the reason is that because biodiversity loss is driven by different factors. So the previous team, they took a set of certain drivers and our team took a set of other drivers. So considering that it is really complex and we probably don't have the absolute right numbers here, how do you deal with this type of uncertainty? Is it something that we should you said that we should have standards, we should have like certain standards. Should we wait, or what's your kind of take on that?
I think
how do we tolerate this uncertainty?
I think our sense as researchers is that it's been fascinating as a researcher to observe companies' responses to biodiversity, because indeed they're kind of waiting for the perfect response. And if you think kind of philosophically that biodiversity is about the diversity in nature, it is philosophically impossible to ever find a measure or metric or that is perfect. Anything we find is imperfect or there are approximations, and it depends on how the metric or measure has been kind of how you get there, how it's been operationalized. So basically you can have foolish measures or you can have helpful measures. So we have to be really careful with this field. But essentially, if you think about a business leader or an owner, what you need to think about is how does our business connect to biodiversity and how does it connect to nature? So and that is the essential question. So and I think that leads to the essential question, which is that the way in which we have over the last centuries and decades kind of managed business and the way we've been taught. I come from a business school, that's what we've been teaching. So there's a legacy there that is changing gradually. That in a sense, what is our connection to nature, and do we extract nature or do we actually respect nature? And that is in a sense, if we go back, it's a tradition that starts with Christianity, when 2,000 years ago, when we started to think that human beings are higher in the hierarchy than other species, and that's what we're seeing the consequences now. So that's why I would bring back. I think one reason for companies not to do anything is to say, this is too complex. And the moment you start saying, hang on, the simple thing is, what is our business model? What is it that we actually sell? What's the product or härpäke? What is it that we're doing? How does it connect to nature? And then, so that's the essential kind of even a workshop around that, or kind of any coffee table conversation. The next question then, if we look at the IPBES report, or if you look at the direct and indirect drivers of biodiversity, the next mapping is then to start thinking what are the elements that kind of impact on biodiversity in our sector. And there you find climate change. A lot of companies are doing that work already. Fantastic, bingo. You find environmental mikä on siis saastuminen? Pollution. Bingo, a lot of companies have that in their environmental reporting already. Then you have land use, species use. So in a sense, so the question is in a sense connecting to what is already done and reported in the company and seeing actually what is missing compared to the known drivers, indirect drivers. But I would actually, if I would be working on these things in a company, I'd start with the IPBES report drivers and indirect drivers and think about how do they connect to my business and to my products and the supply chains that we are part of.
Yeah. I think you don't have to aim to be a kind of a grade student here. C is enough, D is enough, just start. And like you said, that is actually a very good report because there you can have a clear solutions already, what companies can use. Recycling, for example, is one when we think about the virgin materials and the land use after that one and so on. You could go, like there is a path behind that word which actually leads to the biodiversity or the nature itself. So there are solutions. And maybe not are directly linked to species, but somehow they are linked to nature itself.
And learning by doing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's going to take a long time. So learning by doing and also impacting. This is also impacting then the company culture.
Exactly.
How are we looking at this? What does it mean for us? Because to get everyone on board, they have to understand what it's about, and that takes time. And it doesn't go by doing it once. We have a training, 45 minutes on biodiversity. Then so go. It takes time, and you have to do it again and again, and engage people. And most people are very interested, I find, in these questions still. So that's not really an issue.
And now we just got a 1 minute notice. So ladies have already told us what would be the recommendations for companies. What should they start with? But how about you? Representing the industry that is expert on these, so you get the final say on what should all companies now do in terms of biodiversity reporting. What should they at least pay attention to?
Go and start it. Thank you.
Very good.
It won't be perfect, but you need to start it, and then it improves by time.
And if you're looking for one indicator, land use is perhaps kind of a great proxy. Land, sea use, water use. Species use. So, but if you want one proxy, land use.
Yep, it's coming back. We used to calculate a long time ago that, and now it's coming back.
I guess we need to have a separate panel about that.
That's for next fall.
There is a saying that data is the new oil, but oil is actually the new land, because we used to have a planet where we actually knew that land was a limited resource, but when we got oil, we kind of forgot it. And now we're getting back there.
Yep.
So history gives us many learnings in order to make a greener future. 1 minute more. Okay, so this is difficult to sort of time when I don't have a watch anywhere. But I have to say that I'm thanking all of you for participating here, and definitely these are themes that we could talk a lot more. And actually, just a advertisement for this final moments. The next Biodiversity Roundtable, together with EY, is about food systems, and that will take place in June. June 7th, if I remember correctly. Can found the date from Biodiversity website. So we will continue the discussions about the systemic impacts of biodiversity, especially in the food sector. So thank you so much for joining and having this nice Friday afternoon. And thank you all for joining us there on the other side of this fancy camera I'm staring at now. I hope you all have a great weekend and go home thinking about all things biodiversity related.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming. Really nice having you here.
Yeah.